prog rock band and jazz rock bands I played, but I wanted to always compose. That was my goal, to compose, and my main interest. And I wanted the band to play my music, but it was too difficult for them.
As soon as I heard it, I really had a strong desire to want to connect with you and talk with you about it, because it's really unique. Tell us about your new album.
Since From the Dark Ages, that was the project that I actually conceived and actually even recorded in my MIDI studio a long time ago. After immigration, we were settling in a new country. It was very tough. No sponsorship, no money. But my husband, he said, you have to continue your music. And since I was not going anywhere, raising the children at home, so he got me some MIDI studio, and I was working several years. I used my MIDI studio and continued to work. And one of those projects was the project about the medieval times, because I was very much fascinated with medieval times since my childhood. But my point, my outlook to medieval times was always like fairy tale like. It's not real, like historical based, but whatever I read in fairy tales, of course, many different fairy tales, and not necessarily nailing to the certain century, but kind of like the castle idea, the knights idea, and of course it was all like mixed, because it's a huge stretch of time. But whatever, like masquerade, for example, wasn't available until later Middle Ages. But for me, it was all together. my album, that's why I called it Sins, because I usually like to write like a story, kind of like something that would connect all the tracks. Like I did like albums with the story, like I have a Lonely Man and His Fish. I wrote a story about the man who was lonely and didn't have a family, had a pet fish, and what happened. Or maybe The Adventures of the Wildflower. And I wrote a story about the seed that grew and didn't know what it was, and how it all like happened. So basically, I like to do that. Or I had like Nocturnal Animals, which wasn't a story, but each animal was presented as almost like a human with characteristics of the certain animal. So, I like to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so you're driven. Your music seems to be driven. You want to attach your music to some kind of a purpose, then, in other words.
Conceptual. When I was very little, I started to play by ear. My mom was musician, pianist, wonderful pianist and teacher. And I started to play very early, and I would make up the songs. That was, you see, in me from the very beginning. The music always connected to something like in life, in nature, or in my feelings. I didn't get into trouble with any drugs or anything because I had my music. Those are my paintings.
Oh, really? That's fantastic. Wow, you're a great artist.
This is
cool.
Psalms set to music, and I painted this kind of, it's like this woman is getting out of the crowded world towards something in heaven. I don't consider myself a painter, but I want to make sure that my own concepts for music are represented also in this, because that's how I feel it. Mm-hmm. That's why I don't want to use any kind of other art than mine, because it's never exactly what I want. It started when I had like a recorded album, Lions, and the concept was, the story was that I am becoming a lioness and I live among lions. And when I was working on that album and music and everything, and I remember we went to Europe to record, and then everywhere I looked for lions, all those doors with lions, all those like lions. I was making pictures, and then, I could not find any kind of photo or picture or anywhere that would be connected to my story, really. Even went to the zoo and spent the whole day in the zoo to photograph lions, but it still did not help. So I decided to paint my own. And how it started in 2000, I think, 13, I started to paint my own cover art.
Cool. You've got a new album coming out. Do you have your own sort of record company or label?
I had some interest from labels, and but I felt like what I'm doing, it's something that I cannot really do under the label, because I need to have that power to decide what I'm doing exactly and how I'm doing it. We had like LNH production started even before that, but it wasn't until like 2010 when it really started to be a label, when I started to release those properly recorded, not in a MIDI studio, but with great musicians. Mm-hmm. And by the way, it's been 15 years. This year is kind of I'm gonna get out the celebration of my 15-year anniversary from the start of my proper career.
Right.
Which started really late because of immigration, children. We didn't speak good English when we came to America, so that was very hard. And it took years for me to actually start my career, my musical journey.
There was a drummer I noticed that had worked with you. He's Manu Katché. Yeah, that really perked my ear. But there are a lot of really great musicians who work with. Interesting to me that you're highly collaborative and you're interested always in drawing on the talents of others and collaborating. Tell me a little about that.
Well, I was raised as a classical musician, but then in my teens, I started to be very interested in all other styles, and I listened to a lot of different albums, even though we didn't have, we couldn't buy anything. Everything was like bootlegged, and some of the records, I didn't even know who it was. So I listened to a lot of stuff, of course, Beatles and Pink Floyd and Black Sabbath and ABBA and all of Mahavishnu Orchestra, all kind of stuff. And that was really important for me. And so that's how, when I started to listen, and I played also in the rock band and jazz rock band and whatever, prog rock band and jazz rock bands I played. But I wanted to always, composed. That was my goal, to compose, and my main interest. And I wanted the band to play my music, but it was too difficult for them. So they couldn't really play my music because I guess maybe they were good, but they weren't professionals, and I was professional. So my music was definitely combining all those influences based on the classical education I got.
Right.
And that's why it was too difficult. Maybe I didn't even understand it at that point. So I was eagerly looking for the ways to play my music in the band, because even though I was a concert pianist, but I didn't want to just play my music on piano. It was not enough for me. I heard all the instruments and, so I really wanted to have a band. Even now I want to have a band. You see, I always wanted to have a band, but it wasn't possible. Like, it wasn't possible there, and it wasn't possible here, because I tried to have a local band here in North Carolina. It wasn't what I wanted. But when I hire all those great musicians to play my music, it works out really well. But I cannot have them all in a band. And I cannot really have this, because musicians agree to play. They like my music. They agree to play for me. But they will not be band members, like they're all over the world.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, here you go.
Yeah.
I have to do this way. But on the other hand, I actually like it because every record I make is different.
That reminds me of like the band that got me into progressive rock, and I was only in grade 3 in school at the time, was Alan Parsons Project. You're probably familiar with the Alan Parsons Project. How are you?
I'm not, probably not.
Oh, okay. Well, it's sort of similar. Where every album he's got different musicians, different singers. He has a few that come back on all of the albums, but it reminds me a bit of that. By the way, your music, I haven't checked all of your catalog, but it sounds like you're mostly instrumental. Is that right?
Yes. Alan
Oh,
Parsons.
Alan Parsons Project. Yeah,
I look him up.
he's a
Yeah,
classic
by
one.
the way, I looked up on your channel that you actually, as a musician, you cover a lot of different styles and genres.
Yeah, I do. That's true. I haven't listened to all of your albums yet. I'm still catching up on a lot. The new ones really, the thing that amazed me about it, well, first of all, it is all instrumental. Is that correct? You don't
Oh,
do
yeah,
singing
yes,
with songs?
about this. There is one record I made, Better Than Gold and Silver, also with the biblical psalms set to music. One out of 2 discs is vocal psalms. So I am. This is because that's biblical psalms, so they have to be sung, and that's how I compose them for. With the vocal part, all the like word for word from King James Bible, but unfortunately, I have hard time finding singers for because I'm very, very, very specific, like about how it should be sung.
Right.
So that's one. Better Than Gold and Silver has one vocal disc, and another disc is the same psalms but just instrumental. I composed for voice a lot, but I have hard time finding singers. When we came to America, I actually composed 21 psalm for the person I met here in America, singer, which I really liked her voice, and I was inspired to like kind of create for her voice, and we had like performances. Mostly at churches, but it was in the very beginning when I still didn't even know what I was doing, because my composing style kind of developed. I am like mostly instrumental composer, like just because it's if I could have sang, I cannot sing. You see, that's a problem. If I could sing, that would be a different story. But God gave me a lot of things, but He didn't give me a voice.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
when I was a choir director at church, I worked for 22 and a half years, worked for different churches here in America. And with the choir, I had to sing a little bit to show them, but it was bad. I mean, I could, that it was not like, basically, I can sing, I can show something, but not, I don't have a vocal ability to really sing well because of some kind of problem.
Well, that's interesting that you're a choir director. That's kind of cool. Did you ever incorporate that into any of your albums? Did you ever have any choirs singing?
Yeah. Actually, choir sang some of my psalms that I see. This is the setting biblical psalms to music was the project that started even like while I was in my home country, and so it was something that maybe I don't know. It's very important for me. I'm preparing like I already have 2 installments. I'm preparing next year. I'm going to record the third installment of the Psalms. So and it probably going to continue because it's it's something that I feel like how that I do this. it can speak to many people, no matter what style, because my style is very inclusive. I think it's very important that people would listen to it, and they would feel power of God's word.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of attempts to do this, and but they are kind of narrow, either way, this or that. And so for the narrow, for the niche of people, but I try to do it like, well, don't try, it's the way I do it. I think it can speak to more people, but I have to find good singers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I still haven't lost the hope, but
Yeah.
everything will happen in time. You will just have to be patient, right?
Yeah. It's interesting that your spirituality is actually, of course, uh, finding itself expressed in your music. So obviously you're a spiritual person. That reminds me of, I guess some of the classical composer Bach and stuff like that, and the God or Christianity was a big thing in music. I've listened to the most of your first album through. I mean, your current album that's coming out at the end of March. That's right.
March 28th.
And I was most inspired by how it's sort of classical, it's sort of jazz, but it's not overtly classical or overtly jazz. It's and I've seen a few clips. Like if you go to your YouTube channel, you have a video where some people are talking, giving their impressions of your music. There's a common thread there. A lot of people note this interesting meshing of the jazz and classical, which is really it's really kind of mind-boggling that you can kind of move in and out of them so naturally, almost in a liquid way, Tell me a little about your compositions. It looks like sometimes you have notations, so you've written it literally so that you can follow it on the paper. It's not in your head, or how does that work? Is it just a guide, or?
Yeah, well, I definitely compose and prepare scores and lead sheets. And so maybe it comes out more like classical because I have very different structures. So the structure-wise, it definitely comes from the classical world where every song has a structure, and there are simpler structures or more complicated structures, but it's all falls like the rock songs, for example. They most of the times, well, progressive rock has more interesting developments. But just the rock songs are simple, and traditional jazz is simple, also like head improvisation and head, choruses and goes back to the tune. But I since I come from very, very a lot of educational classical music, and I've studied it all, and definitely I like the structures because I can have different structure in every song, but also I can have more than one tune. I have transitions, I have definitely improvisations, and I line them up different way, and I have maybe introduction or prelude, or I have like coda or in an ambient and everything. So it's like that's why it probably comes out more like classical because of that. But the sound of it, I don't think there's anything classical in the sense from the Dark Ages, apart from the structures. Because and the reason that this is something that I was doing earlier in my life, influenced by the rock music. So basically, when I composed in my MIDI studio, it was more in that direction. Then I started to I learned about contemporary jazz, like ECM label, and I didn't even know about it until like 2005 or 6. And then I started to kind of work in that direction. I started to record with those contemporary jazz musicians who a lot of them belong to ECM label, like Ariel Anderson, bassist. So in my music kind of shifted in that direction more. And basically, but I was exploring all of those different ways to actually of sound, and I loved it, and I like it still. But with the synths from the Dark Ages, I kind of go back to my earlier times when I actually was writing more in the prog rock way than in anything else. Before even I did the more jazzy stuff. So basically, that's why I kind of going in that direction and back to that direction again. And the album that I will record this year will be also something like this, but without the medieval, because here is like since it was all my tunes, of course. I didn't use any real medieval tunes, but I intentionally, I guess, wrote those tunes kind of, a lot of them sound like medieval tunes because of the subject, but you know, and this is one of the kind. There's going to be no more like this.
Okay.
It's one of a kind. But what I'm going to record is going to be still in the more like still more prog rock than jazz. But I always include improvisations, because I think improvisation is a very, very meaningful, very, first of all, the musicians who play the tunes and who play my scores, they all great musicians, and for them to express themselves better, when they improvise, they have a chance to shine, they have a chance to show off what they can do. And also for the music, it works really well, because all those musicians, well, I don't work with musicians who cannot do it. I mean, I only work with those who I trust, because improvisation is not rehearsed, it's not written down, it's something that I risk.
Yeah.
In the studio.
Yeah. It's funny, a lot of rock music doesn't really lend itself too much to improvisation. And I mean, myself, I used to think, oh, I can never play jazz. I love jazz. I thought I could never play it. But I ended up kind of teaching myself, and sort of pushed myself to join. I made a band with a bunch of locals who wanted to do Pat Metheny band covers.
Yeah.
And playing Pat Metheny, learning his songs, was like going to university for me. It was like, even though I had played guitar for decades, it really, I grew so much. And then I started learning to do a lot more improvisation live with jazz fusion. Like right now, I've got a duo with a piano player, Dee Cooper. Actually, she plays the piano and I play the Spanish guitar, and we do all our own music. And we every song, it's a ton of improvisation, and improvisation is so important for a musician. And I think a lot of musicians that I've talked to, young upcoming guitarists, and that they seem to get stuck sometimes. They feel like they kind of reached a sort of plateau, and every time they pick up their instrument, they just play the same licks, Yeah. And I think jazz, more than any other kind of music, and jazz fusion too, of course, really pushes you to explore a lot more and grow a lot more. It really seems to be an essential thing to do if you want to grow as a musician. I'm not sure there are any other genres of music that'll force you to grow more than jazz. And I think it's intimidating, probably. Intimidation is probably a problem for a lot of musicians. They think, oh, I can't do that. But I think if you get yourself doing it, you can really tackle that, I think.
Yeah, well, David Bowie, in his Black Star, he hired jazz musicians. Like Danny McCaslin on the saxophone, Mark Guiliana on drums, and others. So basically, jazz seeps into every genre now, and of course, but it's not like what we used to like think about, like traditional jazz figures like Oscar Peterson or Duke Ellington. Jazz is more like now so wide and so inclusive, and there's a traditional jazz now, and there's a European contemporary jazz, there's a free jazz, so all of it. But I guess people call jazz anything that has improvisation. So if people improvise, then it already can be called jazz.
Right, right, yeah. So we've got exactly 2 minutes left. So I've really enjoyed this interview and getting to know you, Yelena. I love your music, and I'm going to explore a lot more. And you're very prolific. I've noticed there's really an incredible amount of music that you've created, covering lots of territories. Is there anything else you just want to mention before we wrap up?
Well, I definitely am grateful for this interest, and I hope we're gonna talk again maybe someday, because
Yeah, absolutely.
you're gonna dig me more into it, and I hope you're gonna like what you hear, because it's all different, and since you're yourself so wide as a musician, so I hope we can talk again, and I would like to hear your opinion, and yeah, well,
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. That'll be for sure. We'll do that again. We'll talk again. We'll be in touch again, and I'll be following your progress and your projects. And so that's it. Thanks everybody for watching. The links are down below. Of course, you can go check out the music for yourself. And thank you again for the interview, Lena.
well, thank you.
Okay. We'll see you later then.
Okay, bye
Okay.
bye.
Bye-bye.